And with us is one of the correspondents who broke this story, Ronen Bergman, staff writer of the New York Times and author of Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Ronen, so much fascinating information in this article. Let's start with one, the presence in Iran of the #2 man of Al-Qaeda, a extremist Sunni organization in this Shiite regime. Your article, as you mentioned, as it says in the article, Iran may have had good reason for wanting to hide the fact that it was harboring an avowed enemy, but it was less clear why Iranian officials would have taken in the Qaeda leader to begin with. Why do you think that?
Yeah, and that's true, Calev. You come to wonder. These are avid enemies of the Iranian Revolution. These are Sunni jihadists that Iran fought in the battlefield of Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Afghanistan and Pakistan fiercely, and educated its people that they are Satan himself. So why do you give host and shelter to Satan himself? I think that there are two possible solutions for that, and for the fact that Iran has given shelter, claiming that they are in custody, but in reality, giving shelter and giving the opportunity to use its territory for operations and for refuge for much of the Al-Qaeda leadership since the early of the previous decade, including the now deceased and the person that was assassinated, Mr. Al-Masri, sorry. And there are two possible solutions and answers to this, and I think that it's the combination of both. First, it's the possible coordination of operations with Al-Qaeda against mutual enemies, the United States or Israel, or giving shelter to those prominent figures of Al-Qaeda while also keeping an eye on them. And being able to have those important figures, giving them, the Iranians, some confidence that Iran would not act against them, that Al-Qaeda would not act against Iran or against Iranian interests. And in fact, that has led Iran to give Abu Muhammad al-Masri, the number one operative in Al-Qaeda, the guy who was behind the murder of hundreds of people, if not thousands, give him a posh apartment in an upscale neighborhood, a Pasdaran in a neighborhood in north of Tehran, giving him false documentation that would allow him to live under the alias of someone called Habib Daoud, a Lebanese scholar of history, a Shiite, and enable him and his daughter Maryam, the widow of the son of Osama bin Laden, Hamza, who was supposed to inherit his father but was also killed in an American assassination in 2019, giving him the ability to live in comfort and travel in Tehran and travel in and out to help his colleagues in Al-Qaeda.
Well, terrorism, I guess, can make some strange bedfellows. Ronen, you literally wrote the book on Israel's targeted killing program, Rise and Kill First. To the best of your knowledge, is this the first time that Israel has basically carried out a targeted killing on behalf of another country, on behalf of the United States? And if so, what does this say? What kind of precedent is this set, and what does it say about the current relations between the U.S. and Israel?
Yeah. Well, it's not the first time. There were other incidents, one in 1965 when Israel helped Moroccan intelligence to trace down, kidnap, and later kill the head of the Moroccan opposition. But going back to our times, Israel and the United States have cooperated in the past in some, though rare, cases of targeted killings. The one that was published, including in my book, the one on the killing of Imad Mounia, the military commander of Hezbollah in February of 2008. These cases are extremely rare, even between friendly countries, even between allies, because it's so controversial, because targeted killing is so sensitive. Countries are very hesitant to share. The fact that the United States has asked Israel to do what the United States was not able to do throughout the last 22 years. He was killed on August 7, exactly on the day, almost on the minute of the anniversary of the bombing of the American embassies in Dar es Salaam and in Nairobi in 1998, the bombings that he orchestrated, commanded, initiated, and planned. The fact that the United States felt confident to ask Israel to do so, that is just an ample proof how intimate, how close the relationship between the two intelligence communities are. And as it goes, the United States was able to ask Israel because Israel has the ability to collect intelligence inside the ranks of the Iranian intelligence agencies, mostly the MOIS and the Revolutionary Guard. I assume Israel was not looking for Al-Qaeda operatives, but found that along the way of collecting intelligence on other things that are of more concern to Israel. By the way, Israel has its own account to settle with al-Masri because he was behind the operation or authorizing the operation of attacking Israeli tourists and killing a few of them in a hotel in Mombasa in 2002. But Israel was not looking at him, but while looking into Iranian intelligence, discovering the fact that this guy was enjoying their hostesses in Tehran and being able to use this remarkable ability to not just to collect, but also to implement operations inside Iranian territory, inside an upscale, highly guarded neighborhood in Tehran.
Right. Sometimes just opportunity is the reason for as many intelligence operations. They just happen at the time. Ronen, I don't, as a journalist, I don't expect you to reveal your sources, but there's always speculation when stories like this break over not only who, but more important, why the information came out at this time. Now, I'm sure you've heard there were some in the Israeli political world who are already speculating that Israeli sources wanted this information to come out before the Biden administration takes office and maybe sort of make it clear to them how valuable an asset they have in Israel, and they should keep that in mind. What's your reaction to such comments?
Well, you know, Calev, since this was published early yesterday, it's evening time now on Sunday in Israel, in Tel Aviv, I have read, I would say, with much amusement, so many analysis, educated op-eds explaining why the New York Times published that story in this specific time. So I can, you know, without getting into, of course, into the identity of sources, we have explained that this was reported mainly from Washington, U.S. officials, intelligence officials, and we have also said that 4 different intelligence officials have updated and corroborated the information at the basis of this story, including the fact that the U.S. asked Israel to operate and kill Mr. al-Masri in Tehran. And by the way, this was fully corroborated by a follow-up story in the Washington Post that was just a few hours ago was posted online. So without going into the issue of sources, which, as you can understand, is very, very sensitive, especially in such when delivering information that until it was published yesterday was at the know-how of a very small group of U.S. officials. I can tell you that we have published that story yesterday because this was the time when we finished working on the story. Something that took time. My great colleagues at the New York Times, Adam Goldman, Eric Schmidt, and Farnaz Fasihi, and other colleagues, reporters and editors, we have worked on that for a very long time. We knew the story for an assassination that took place in August. We knew it for some time. We worked, and when we felt that this is the right moment to publish in terms of vetting the information, finishing the reporting, securing the safety of our sources, this is when we published. We were not motivated or pushed by any entity, government, agency. I would say to the contrary. There were only attempts to hold us back and prevent us from publishing the story, not to publish it. And therefore, you know, it's nice to see the knowledgeable comments from colleagues knowing why we have published it, but it has nothing to do with how things actually developed and how this story was reported and researched.
Well, in about 30 seconds, Ronen, is Israel liable to retaliation from Al-Qaeda, an Israeli target, because of this revelation?
Al-Qaeda is a weak organization. I think it's not a coincidence that it did not admit that he just lost his head of operation. I don't think that Al-Qaeda need motivation to hurt Israel or Israeli targets. I just don't think that they have the capability. I think that the important thing is Iran, and that the confrontation between Israel on one hand, or Israel and the United States on one hand, and Iran on the other, and confrontation that is long time should be called war, is going on. And what we have seen in August in Tehran is not the end, it's just the beginning.
Right, and those viewers who thought that Israeli TV series Tehran could be somewhat exaggerated, well, I guess it was, but stories like this show that there's certainly some basis to exploits and escapades like that.
James Bond Joyce style.
That's right. Ronen Bergman from the New York Times, thank you for joining us on I-24 News.